No, I know. I was looking for Ray. He's not here right now.
Okay.
I'll yell at your flag if he shows up.
Okay. Okay, we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. A little bit of housekeeping. Anybody that would like to address the commission, if you would please see Tara there at the front desk and fill out one of these blue sheets. If you wish to speak to a specific agenda item, note that on the blue sheet. If you wish to speak on a matter that's not on the agenda, there will be a call to the public, but this will, if you'll fill out a blue sheet, that will ensure that we give you an opportunity to speak. Would everybody please remember to silence or mute your cell phones? Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to welcome everybody this morning, and well, what a nice facility we have here in Level for this meeting. With that, we will go ahead and move on to our first agenda item. Which I guess is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. I know that they've been sent to all the commissioners for review. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Rael. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. With that, Director Talbot, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Commission, guests, and staff. Thank you very much. It has been a seemingly busy time since our last Commission meeting, and starting with the Governor's Office, we have worked with the Governor's Office on sage grouse issues, grizzly bear issues, and I guess also of equal importance, employee recognition. And the Governor has, since he's taken office, taken the time to recognize employees for their dedication and hard work, and certainly several of our employees, Brian DeBolt, Julie Federer, and Kelly Todd, were recognized by the Governor and had the opportunity to go and visit with him about their service to the state of Wyoming and the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. In addition to that, the Governor's Task Force on Wildlife Funding, that report has been submitted to the Governor from the task force for his review and consideration. That report is not final at this time, but has been completed in draft. Legislatively, it's been very busy for the agency. Joint Appropriations Committee, there was some language from Joint Appropriations to clean up. The intent was to clean up the requirement of the Commission to request general fund dollars. And recall that during the last session of the legislature, the legislature took about $10.8 million from the Commission for those 5 generally funded programs and supported a license fee increase that will go into place this January. But as a result of that, there was legislation to clean that statute up to not require the Commission to request that dollars. But the way it was drafted, it would have required JAC approval for Commission funds expended on those programs. And so we met with JAC, and I'm glad to report to you that that oversight will not happen. And it's the recommendation of JAC simply to strike that entire or repeal that entire statute. So that was a very positive outcome on that legislation. We spent a lot of time in front of Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife. Recall that there are 4 interim topics: the sensitive data, the sale of GPS coordinates, and the issue with preseason scouting and selling of that information to individuals on the internet. A very long discussion on complementary licenses around the request of the Wyoming's Women's Foundation for licenses for their hunt. And most recently, at the last meeting, there was legislation, a draft bill from TRW that actually passed on an 8-6 vote that will require the commission and the department to have legislative approval and oversight of all MOUs that go before the commission and are entered into with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Should that bill be enacted into law, it will require much more planning on behalf of the commission and the department to carry on what we consider normal business with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There are several other pieces of legislation that we have been told that will be filed this year. Those are confidential at this time, but I think we'll see many of the subjects that we have dealt with in the past come up again. We held a staff retreat and also visited with Brandt, which is a licensing company, to see if we could get some additional ideas from them or recommendations, at least to look at our licensing system and see if there's some way that we can improve that. I had the opportunity to attend the INE, the Regional Information and Education Coordinators meeting in Lander, and spend an afternoon visiting with them about future direction of our information and education efforts. As you all are aware, we selected Dee Dee Hawk as the Services Division Chief and look forward to Dee Dee taking on those responsibilities and duties as we move forward. We hosted a statewide webinar to discuss our strategic planning and public engagement process, and Rennie McKay will be updating the commission in further detail on that throughout this meeting. I had the opportunity to attend the Fish Division Supervisors meeting in Lander and have a quite lengthy open discussion with them. I thought that was a very positive opportunity to answer lots of questions and provide them insight on where the commission is going and some future direction for the department. I had the opportunity actually in my travels to stop by the Du Bois camp and the renovation there, actually on 3 different occasions, and it's pretty impressive how that is advancing along. I think the commission will be quite pleased with that and the way that project is completed. One of those visits, when I was in Lander with the Fish Division Supervisors, I went up and our folks hosted a tour with a portion of the working group that we started that project with, and that was kudos to our folks for bringing the public in and showing them where we were going. But that is a very positive aspect of that community. I attended the Bighorn Bash, which is the annual fundraiser for the Sheep Center, and certainly during that time had the opportunity to speak with many individuals from the community, and folks are very supportive of the commission's actions as far as that go. I had the opportunity also to attend the Bass Pro Shops Johnny Morris Wonders of Wildlife National Museum opening in Springfield, Missouri. Many directors and prominent folks in the outdoor world were there. President Jimmy Carter and President Bush were there as well. An incredible opportunity to interact with some great conservationists of our time and meet those folks as well. Attended a tri-state meeting with Montana and Idaho, and certainly talk about the topics: grizzly bears, sage grouse, aquatic invasive species, chronic wasting disease, and as you're all aware, chronic wasting disease is becoming more and more of an issue with wildlife management agencies, not only in the West, but across this country. I had the opportunity to attend the fall summit of the tourism industry in Saratoga. We continue to work very closely with the Office of Tourism, and it's very encouraging to me that those folks clearly recognize the value of wildlife in each of their communities. In addition to that, I had the opportunity when we went to the Afton Commission meeting last year, the local radio personality Duke Dance. We have started a monthly radio show, and I continue that on to this day. But that has been pretty enjoyable as well. Just a couple of quick updates as far as happenings in the state. Recall that this is the first year that we've hunted wolves in the state of Wyoming. We took a 2-year break there, and we have harvested 34 wolves this year through the use of a sportsman. So I have had the opportunity with Deputy Director Smith to stop by and tour the Laramie facility, and that's quite a facility. I look forward to the commission having the opportunity to do that as well. And then finally, Commissioner Culver and many of the staff attended the National Hunting and Fishing Day celebration at the University of Wyoming football game. And that was also National Ag Day, so we invited many of our current and former landowners of the year to take place in that, and I think that was a tremendous success as far as not only recognizing landowners of the year, but recognizing the contributions of sportsmen and anglers in this state, and interacting with the public. So with that, Mr. President, I will conclude my report and take any questions from the commission if you have any.
I've got a couple of Scott. The wolf number, the 34, can you break that down into the trophy area and the predator zone?
Mr. President, members of the commission, all 34 of those wolves that I reported to you have been taken inside of the trophy game area. Okay. The last that I recall that there have been 27 wolves harvested in the predator area.
So 61, okay. Thank you. One other question. The TRW interim topic on MOUs, so that has been narrowed down from any MOU with the federal government to just the Fish and Wildlife Service now.
Mr. President, members of the commission, that's correct.
But it would require approval of the full legislative body, not just the TRW committee?
That's correct, Mr. President.
Okay.
And the way the draft bill is worded right now, and I can get that to you. That bill just came out of committee last week, and we will forward that to the commission for your approval or your review. But it says approval and denial of any MOU, and also has a provision in the bill for an annual and a 3-year review of MOUs.
Do you have any idea on how many MOUs we currently have with Fish and Wildlife Service?
Those, Mr. President, these MOUs are specifically with sensitive species and endangered species, and we have about a half a dozen. As far as other MOUs with other federal agencies and other issues with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's hundreds of MOUs. And those, recall, Mr. President, that we have memorandums of agreement with everything from the Animal Damage Management Board to the Forest Service to the BLM. Many of our habitat projects actually result in an MOU as well. So this just focuses on sensitive and endangered species issues with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Thank you. Other questions for Scott?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. Yes. One more. Okay. I apologize for that sidebar. Rennie, before you get started, I've got one thing. Senator Peterson has joined us. Senator Peterson, thank you very much for your attendance today. And we did mention, if you would like to address the commission at any point, if you will just let Tara know, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. And you can address. Rennie,
Mr.
what
President,
do you got for us today?
good morning. I'm here to talk with you all about the proposed dates and locations for the commission meetings in the upcoming year. So if you'd like, we could just move through those month by month and try to get those set. Sherry can try to factor in the final decision here in the minutes, so that's reflected, and then those will be posted on our website here as well. So, Mr. President, the first discussion would be January of 2018. Last year, we tried to move ahead so that January meeting was already scheduled. So had scheduled that for January 17th and 18th in Cheyenne. I've thrown out the idea for all of you to consider that we could move that to Douglas because there is no, the legislative session is not happening at that time. So there's less of a pressure to be in Cheyenne at that time. We are contemplating whether or not we would like to have some sort of roundtable with different NGOs and those interested in, especially those partner organizations to Game and Fish. And so we were thinking about doing that in Cheyenne, but we could move that to Douglas as well. But we would be adding that on to kind of outside the commission meeting. And of course, all of you would be welcome to be there to participate in that. But it would just be an opportunity to chat with those partner organizations about what's going on with Game and Fish, looking ahead to the legislative session, and talking about things like the expo and planning that further, and also just hearing what's on their minds and how we can help them. So we were trying to add that on to the January 2018 meeting, so we could also hopefully get some more groups to be here for the commission meeting in January 2018. So we'd just like your input on that, if you'd like to move that meeting or keep it in Cheyenne, and if those dates still stand.
What's the pleasure of the commission?
I have no preference. Cheyenne's fine with me.
I think Douglas would be fine.
One thing, Douglas is a little more central if we're going to try to bring in other groups for a round robin. So.
It's fine with me.
Douglas is fine with me.
Consensus, I think. Douglas?
Rennie keeps looking at me to object, so.
The Cheyenne guy.
Yeah, the Cheyenne guy.
I don't care.
All right. So we'll have that Douglas on January 17th and 18th of 2018. Okay. So the next discussion, we've talked about this previously, for March of 2018. That is going to be the first time that we will hold a commission meeting in conjunction with the Wyoming Outdoor Hall of Fame, and that ceremony takes place at Cody. So there is less flexibility here because for a timing to make sure we're in Cody and can have access to the Center of the West, which has been the host for the Outdoor Hall of Fame. That is set. I believe we have that set for the actual evening of the 15th of March 15th. So you'd finish up your commission meeting and be invited to stick around for the Wyoming Outdoor Hall of Fame induction banquet that evening in Cody. But there's less flexibility there, but of course, this is all up to you finally.
So you're talking about the 13th and 14th of the meeting before the...
No, sorry, Mr. President, the meeting would be the 14th and 15th. And the banquet would be the evening of the 15th. So it would...
Okay. That's in Cody. Why don't you, I tell you what, unless anybody has any discussion on any particular meeting or location, we'll just keep moving on, and then we'll move on them at the end. Okay?
Thank you. April meeting. It's a season-setting meeting. We're proposing April 25th and 26th in Lander. This is a move. We've traditionally done this in Casper, But with technologies, we do not need to continue to always do the April meeting in Casper. So we can move that. It stays at a central location. That was the thinking there.
Okay.
Next up is July, and the proposal is July 10th and 11th in Laramie. This would make it possible for us to also do a tour of the new forensic lab and regional office in Laramie that will be operational at that time, and so could have a ribbon cutting ceremony at that meeting as well.
That,
July 10, 11. And for those of you interested, WAFWA takes place, the summer meeting is the 12th through the 18th, and that's in Oregon this year.
was the 12th through the 18th.
Next up is September. We're proposing the 18th and 19th of September. And I believe we'd like the proposal for this location to be Du Bois. So there would be the opportunity to see the new camp, and we could meet at the Whiskey Mountain Conservation Camp. It's outside of the summer season, so there will be use there this summer, and this would allow, it wouldn't interfere with anything for sure with any youth camps. When we make that choice, it is unlikely we could live stream that meeting, and we'll just let the commission know, hear nothing but positive feedback from the public and our agency and other agencies about the choice that and investment you all have made in live streaming these meetings. When it doesn't happen, people do get a little agitated because they've become accustomed to it. But I think we try to make the commitment that we're only able to do that when the technology in the facility allows for it, and it wouldn't likely work out of that Whiskey Mountain Conservation Camp. There is internet there, and I believe we can record it and we can upload it to the internet later. That's the 18th and 19th in Du Bois. Next up's November. The proposal is the 13th and 14th in Worland. And that gets us through 2018. If you're interested, we can try to set dates in January of 2019, so that we come back here a year from now to again kind of plan a year out. If you're interested, the things to consider in January are that the legislative session convenes on January 8th, and Martin Luther King Day, Equality Day, is January 21st. If you're interested in that, we could try to come up with some dates, or we can just revisit that sometime later this year or later in the next 12 months.
I guess there's no problem in waiting for a while to set the January meeting, is there? Or unless anybody has an objection, we'll just wait for that. Okay, discussion on the rest of these dates and locations. Everybody okay with those, or?
Mr. President, I wonder about Worland. I mean, where else haven't we been? We're pretty darn close to Worland today. So I mean, I'm trying to think of where we've missed. We've been.
Evanston.
Mr. Chairman, one place we haven't been in a while is Evanston. We were looking at that for September, but we think that that's a good opportunity to get to the camp and see it. Evanston is not central, but
What? How about we swap Worland for Evanston?
We can do that.
We just try to get around, and
absolutely.
we're here in Lovell today, which is pretty darn close to Worland. If we haven't been to Evanston in a while, maybe that's where we should go.
I'm good with that.
We'll get a checkup over there.
Yeah, I'm good with Evanston. Anybody else?
Well, if you're okay, you got the farthest to drive. That's from one corner to the next.
It's pretty far. Galen and I have quite a drive there.
Yeah,
but
it's a
that's
ways over.
okay.
Yeah, I like Worland better because it's closer, but I can be
You can
wherever.
fly into Salt Lake and drive.
Yeah, there you go.
If you want to spread it around, I think that would be a good idea, mainly because because that puts 3 meetings in my region. And
Can't afford it.
no, that
Okay.
would be good to have it down in Evanston.
I think so.
All right, then can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mike, motion for the aforementioned dates and locations, second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Rael. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Rainey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Commissioners.
Yes.
Good morning again, Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Talbot. I'm going to take the next several minutes here to give the Commission an overview of what certainly from our perspective turned out to be a significant opportunity for both the department and I think the people of the state of Wyoming, and might have been underplayed a little bit leading up to the event. And so anyway, I thought, we did a lot of after action review of the Eclipse event and the department's involvement and what our roles were in that, and decided that when we talked about some of the takeaways that we had, that it would be a good idea to give the Commission an overview of the department's perspective anyway on that event. So as most of you are well aware, this was a nationwide event. This was the path of totality that went across the country. It involved 12 different states, and but the thing that was interesting, and we knew this early on, Wyoming was going to be targeted by a lot of these people who like to watch eclipses because of the potential for there to be clear skies and for the potential for there not to be other things in the environment that would inhibit people's ability to view the eclipse. Here was the path of totality across our state, and you can see the period when the eclipse was visible, or the full eclipse was visible, ranged in time from all the way up to 2 minutes and 28 seconds at Glendo. Glendo in Platte County was considered the epicenter in our state of the eclipse, and the period there was like you said, it was a good, or like I said, was a good 2.5 minutes. Leading up to this event, there was a number of folks from across the state that began planning as far as 2 and 3 years out, and so these were all of the different partners that we worked with as we worked in advance of this event to plan for it and to make sure that we identified early what the department's primary roles would be and some of the things that we needed to make sure we did on behalf of the Commission and on behalf of our statutory charge to ensure that our wildlife resources and the Commission-owned lands were protected. So you can see up here, these were the 5 main goals or efforts that we identified early on. First of all, that we wanted to protect Commission-owned lands, knowing that the use would probably dramatically increase. We obviously needed to plan to conduct our normal activities of being able to enforce Titles 23 and 41, as well as provide watercraft safety. Because of the epicenter of where we knew that the longest period of eclipse was going to occur, the longest period of darkness was going to occur being in, actually if you draw it on a map, the dot is in Glendo Reservoir. We knew that, and the fact that it was in August, we knew that people may want to participate by viewing it from the water, and that our watercraft safety efforts could increase. So that was another established goal. With the potential for increased watercraft in the state, we wanted to make sure that we took necessary steps to prevent aquatic invasive species from entering the state, knowing that a lot more boats might enter the state during this period. And then also, and lastly, to provide assistance to other state agencies and other local law enforcement agencies in their efforts. So these are some of the things we identified that were concerning to us as we planned how we were going to execute those 5, or how we were going to plan for those 5 goals to make sure that we accomplished them. Obviously, land use, like I already mentioned, watercraft, the fact that any kind of a fire late in the season on a WHMA could have potential safety problems, as well as potential impact on our WHMAs over the long haul. And we were also concerned with the potential for people to view the eclipse from backcountry, that we might have increased conflicts with large carnivores. So as we planned for contingencies and different things that might happen around the state, those are kind of some of the things that, from a wildlife perspective and from a game and fish perspective, we thought we needed to really hone in on. So as we prepared for this event, we really worked closely with the Office of Homeland Security. We worked with emergency management across the state. Really, we identified 4 kind of main areas or regions across the state where the challenges we felt would be different. So we really kind of had a group that focused on making a plan for the Jackson area and west of the Continental Divide. Another group that was primarily the Lander region that focused on Fremont County, Ocean Lake, Boise, that part of the state. A Casper-based region to focus on the river, as well as the lakes around Casper. And Casper was being the largest city or the largest town in the path of totality in Wyoming. We figured, and there was many estimates that predicted there would be a lot of additional visitors to Casper. And then lastly, in the eastern part of the state, another region, another plan for basically Platte, Goshen, and just the very northern part of Laramie counties. So we did go ahead and we put together a pretty good comprehensive statewide plan. I won't bore you with all the details of the plan, but needless to say, we developed a lot of contingencies and details and shared them with all the other agencies, and they did the same thing. And I think as we talk about kind of a wrap-up, I'll talk again about why I think that at the end of the day that was really important. I already talked about this in the 4 geographic areas that we focused on. Some of the things that were important, an important part of this is to amplify or increase the AIS check station efforts, and to make sure that we had adequate coverage not only for Fish Division folks to work those check stations and plan for a lot of increased traffic into the state, but we also had to make sure that we had plans for enforcement to be able to respond and help folks at all these different AIS check stations around the state. We also had a lot of our regions actually took and worked with their local communities and local emergency managers and developed their own plans, and I kind of mentioned that, but we did take all of those plans and include them in one wrapped up statewide plan. I'm going to run through some pictures here because there's definitely, pictures will say 1,000 words. There's a lot of, we asked our field folks to take pictures while they were working with all these people that came into our state during this event, and we got a lot of them. And so this is, for those of you that didn't get an opportunity to experience this, this is what the road looked like this is I-25, and let's see, what does it say there? I think that's
Glendo.
Yeah, that's Cheyenne. Anyway, that's what I-25 looked like from basically Denver to Casper. In fact, this is a site that Commissioner Crank got to view for like 8 hours, I think, that day. 8.5 hours. But he did luckily have his wife with him, who was getting out and handing out cookies to all the people that were sitting in line on the interstate, which I thought was quite hospitable and really reflective of the Wyoming welcoming kind of a personality that we have.
Yeah, only my wife would hand out cookies to the fellow passengers in the traffic jam.
So this is just south of Douglas, and that's Commissioner Crank right up there. And one of the things that this was just south of Glendo. And this was at one of the exits there, just south of Glendo. And you can see people, we were worried, I know the Highway Patrol was worried that folks would really clutter up the actual interstate and would stop on the interstate to watch. But folks were pretty good. You can see here they got off the road at least and left the road clear during the actual event. This was at Glendo Reservoir, for those of you that are familiar, at Airport Bay. And there were actually many scientists and people that I can't remember the society, but there was a big society of all these scientists that study eclipses and that study astronomy. So that was kind of cool. They had telescopes bigger than cars set up out on the prairie there next to the airport bay. This was on Muddy Mountain at I'm not sure exactly where that was on Muddy Mountain, but what we noticed as our folks worked around the state was that people really kind of spread themselves out fairly well. There were some concentrated areas. The other thing is that Wyoming landowners were very accommodating for the most part in allowing folks to come and use their property to view the eclipse. In some of the areas that I personally experienced, there were landowners out there actually welcoming people off the road to come get off the road so they weren't a traffic hazard, to come on in, and they would assign them a place to camp. This was even the night before, and let them camp on their land and then watch the eclipse event, which I thought was really, really reflective of Wyoming's character. It was pretty cool to see. Here was one of our WHMAs in Goshen County. Just some various pictures around the state. It was pretty, I said that people spread out, but in some places it definitely was concentrated. You can see there some of the tent camping, and I don't know where that is in this spot here, but pretty close quarters there. We did check an airplane on Alcova Lake. The question is everybody's asked is, did that guy have to have an AIS sticker? And the answer was absolutely. Some different places, and again, these are WHMAs, commission-owned lands, where we had people viewing the eclipse. Now, one of the things, I look at this picture down here, and it reminds me, one of the things that we did not anticipate is that the level of backcountry use. Based on all the predictions, we expected that there would be, one of our highest use areas would be in the actual area of Jackson itself. And so we planned as such, and we had a lot of folks dedicated to working right around the Jackson area. What we found as people started coming into the state on the day before is that really they were all headed south of Jackson and to the backcountry areas and to trailheads. And so, and the town of Jackson itself, from the reports that, folks that work and live there every day, is it actually, I remember on the morning of the eclipse, they said it's slower in downtown Jackson today than it is on a normal summer day. But our folks in Pinedale were dealing with the Forest Service closing the road because the Upper Green River area on that part of the Bridger Teton Forest was exceeded capacity, and the Forest Service closed the road. So we kind of had to shift resources and really amped up our efforts to provide education to people at trailheads on how to avoid bear conflicts. We were really concerned about bear conflicts. Here was Springer, of all places, Springer in Goshen County. It was packed full of people, and a lot of folks from Colorado and Cheyenne used those areas that were just like here, that were just into the path of totality. This was kind of an interesting sign. I think this was in Teton County. Of course, we got some good pictures of our people working with, like I said, a new constituency in the field. I think this was probably, there was a lot of locations around the state where there were hot air balloons deployed to watch it, which was pretty interesting. I guess we didn't really anticipate that, but there was several areas where the winds were low enough that they could use them. All kinds of different things happen with cultures and different religions that our people had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about, you might say. And there were people that were coming and they were calling our offices and asking what our laws were in our state for sacrificing chickens, for sacrificing cats, and some of these kind of things. And that was interesting. We didn't anticipate that in the plan. It was nowhere in the plan. So again, backcountry areas turned out to be very, very busy. So some of the things that, some of the takeaways, some of the observations that that we had after this event. Number one, the constituency that we worked with was very different than what our employees are accustomed to working with. Most of the folks that came here were not traditional kind of outdoor people. They most of the people that our folks contacted had never hunted or fished. Most of them were people that were just interested, and they followed these eclipses around. And a lot of them were from the Front Range of Colorado. I can't remember what the estimate was, but it was tens of thousands of people that came from the Front Range of Colorado just because they wanted to come to a close location and experience it. But it was interesting because that was one of the first things our people noted is that they had a tremendous opportunity to educate a totally new group of people about what wildlife is all about, why wildlife habitat management areas were important, and what wildlife management is all about. And I can tell you that a lot of our folks going into this were fairly skeptical about it, but at the end, I didn't hear a complaint. Our folks really valued the experience and took a lot away from it. So, you know, we planned for the worst. We kind of you make analogies and you do predictions based on your past experiences. And so our past experiences were when we have a lot of people at the lake, there's problems. And frankly, number one, a lot of people didn't go to the lake, and number two, the people that did come did not cause problems. There was very, very, very low violation rates. People that were here were very respectful. We didn't have littering problems. We anticipated that. There was none of that. We had very few trespass complaints from landowners, and in fact, like I said, landowners were very accommodating to these people. And overall, it was extremely positive. We had no human large carnivore conflicts during the event. We had, one of the things that we tried to plan for was a situation where we had multiple serious events going on across the state at the same time. So, a large carnivore incident with a human attack in the west part of the state. Well, there's a real serious boat wreck in the central part of the state, and then maybe a serious situation involving an employee in another part of the state. And frankly, those things did not occur. We didn't have any major boat wrecks. We didn't have large numbers of violations. They were all minor, the ones that we did encounter, and we had no fires or any issues on WHMAs. No damage reported to any of our properties that we're aware of. So anyway, it was quite an event. Now, some of the things that we learned from this, I've talked about most of this, that our planning efforts, I think, in some respects, I felt like maybe we were over planning a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you look at how at the outcomes, I think we did just right. I think being prepared for all those things was a good thing, and the fact is that the proof's in the pudding. And at the end of the day, all those goals that we had at the beginning, we were able to achieve. Some of the things that were concerning after we evaluated this afterwards is we did make an assumption that we knew that things would be tight and congested during the event. We predicted that there would be a lot of people on the road on the days leading up to the event, and then there'd be kind of a large number of people that came in and then kind of a slow trickle out, and that was not the case. All the roads were very passable in the days leading up to the actual event, and then on that Monday it was gridlock, and then because they all came in at the same time and they all left at the same time. There was very little buildup beforehand, and the buildup that occurred happened over time. And so one of our takeaways on the day of the event is we made an assumption that we would be able to move resources and people around the state to be able to react to any kind of these contingencies that we planned for, and we would not have been able to move around the state. It was so gridlocked that even with emergency vehicles, we had difficulty getting around the state. We had to use back roads, and even then it was difficult. There were highways where there was nowhere to go on the highway other than the borrow pit, and so that was something that when we pass this information along to other states that will deal with this again, and I think it's 3 years, there's another eclipse that'll span kind of the southern part of the country, kind of the south up to the northeast. We're going to pass some of these lessons learned on. The other thing, and I've already mentioned this a little bit, is that the land ethic of most of the folks that came was very, very strong. I mean, people really respected land, and you couldn't, in a lot of places, you couldn't tell they were even there. And so that was very cool. With that, I will stop and answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Brian?
I was curious how many cats were sacrificed.
You know, I never actually saw any of that stuff, but I don't know. I heard, and you know, I never confirmed this or anything, but I heard there were actually pet shelters and stuff around the state that had people come in and try to adopt cats, and that people were talking to chicken farmers and trying to get their chickens. And
You know, I would like to commend the department on your forward planning efforts. I got to tell you, I'll be honest, 1.5 years ago when this was first brought to our attention, I kind of scratched my head. I just couldn't fathom that it would be as big of a deal as it ended up being. So I think the department did a great job, and I appreciate your efforts, Brian.
You bet, thank you. And I did want to kind of end on a note with thanking some of our folks that I think did a really good job, and certainly we had 4 regional supervisors in the path of totality, but it actually took an effort from all of our regional supervisors around the state, and they, along with our field people, did an exceptional job. And I mean, this was an agency event. Every division was involved, and they all worked together very, very well. And the other thing is that we did make sure that we had kind of a lead on this, and Mike Choma took the lead on the planning effort and working with all the agencies and herding the cats and keeping us all coordinated, and he did an exceptional job. He's the one that did the final reports, and that we had twice daily conference calls to check in with everybody around the state and make sure things were going okay, and he did a great job with that. And then the other thing we did is we put one of our people down in the Emergency Operations Center in Cheyenne with the Office of Homeland Security, and that was Mark Nelson. And Mark Nelson worked out of that EOC, they call it, and provided the field with up-to-date information on things that were happening around the state with traffic or with emergencies and those kind of things. And those 2 guys did a really good job for us. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And speaking of Mark Nelson, you are next on the agenda. Mark, welcome.
Good morning, President Culver, members of the Commission, Director Talbot. This agenda item before you this morning is our Commission Regulation Chapter 1, which deals with public information. And one of the hats I wear as project coordinator is the official custodian of records for the Game and Fish. So I work closely with our Assistant Attorney General Representative David DeWald when we get information requests. And a little bit of background with the Wyoming Public Records Act. It's in Title 16, and it directs the state on how we handle public records. And Wyoming is a fairly open state for records. However, there is information within our state agency and other state agencies that we cannot release, either by statute or because it's of a sensitive nature. So when we do get public records requests, we look at it in light of those sideboards that the Record Act gives us. And in 2014, the legislature passed some legislation that directed the Department of Administration and Information to promulgate rules that direct state agencies on how they handle Records Acts, procedures, and fees. So they directed A&I to establish uniform regulations that all state agencies will follow. That was in 2014. In 2016, A&I passed those rules, and that's why we're here before you today to adopt those rules, to put them before the Commission. So you should have on your computers, if not, I have handouts, our draft Chapter 1 revisions. And they're fairly straightforward. You notice there's a lot of strike-throughs in this. And I'll go through the very first change. There's an addition of a statute, Title 16-3103J. And that statute is that legislation that directs the agencies to adopt the A&I rules. So since those rules have been enacted in A&I, we have a lot of rules that are that were in Chapter 1, and that's where the strike-through comes in, that we're recommending just to strike through, delete, because they are now in the A&I Chapter 2 rules. The commission in September looked at your policy on records, and what we did with that records policy, we knew that a lot of this would be going to A&I, although some of it was unique to the Game and Fish. So we adopted, and you commission members approved our policy for records that has a lot of this strike through now is in policy if it's not addressed in the new A&I regulation. So we can turn to page 4. If you have questions on specific deletions here, I'm happy to answer them. If not, we can turn to page 4. So you can see at the bottom, there's section 2 that says the Game and Fish Commission will adopt the following uniform rules. And in subsection A, it lists the Chapter 2 that A&I has adopted, and it directs the public where they can find those regulations. Further on down, you'll see that the wording is, it's a fairly long and I could say cumbersome regulation that we didn't repeat here since it is in regulation. So we've just had this standard language that I think most agencies have adopted similar language, directing the public to the A&I website. Next, Romanet II, just some standard language, does not include any later amendments. Number 3 there, the records will be maintained at our headquarters office. In other notes that you should be aware of, we did have a public meeting on this like every regulation. That was in Cheyenne in September, and no one did show up to that meeting, and we did not receive any online comments on this regulation, on the changes. As far as a fiscal impact, the A&I rules give requesters now the first $180 as a credit. So the rules say that we can charge for employee time and copies. The rules also say that the first $180 is a credit. So we envision some sort of a fiscal impact. We're not sure what, but I know that a lot of requests I get when there's a $50 fee on it, they don't pursue it any longer. Now I think they will. So with that, pretty straightforward. If there's no questions, we ask that the commission vote to approve the Chapter 1 regulation as presented.
Okay, Mark. I apologize for this question in advance. I probably should know this, but I know one of the topics of conversation over the last couple of years has been protecting specific data on, for instance, location of colored wolves in a pack, you know, and I know people do request that information, trying to get a handle on where those packs are, you know, for hunting seasons or whatever. Now, how is that data protected? Do we still need to, on each and every one of those requests, do we still need to, what did we take that before? Judge before, wasn't it? How did...
Mr. President, that is correct, members of the commission. If we do receive requests on collar data for wolves, grizzly bears, other sensitive species, that is not a specific, there's no specific statute that says the custodian shall deny that. There is legislation that is going to be before the legislature this next session that addresses that, but as it stands now, if we do receive a request for that data, we will go before the appropriate district court judge and state our case to withhold those records. And Mr. DeWall can
So,
certainly
so
add
there's
if I-
nothing in these uniform rules then that addresses that?
Mr. President, there is not.
Okay.
And Mr. President, if I could just clarify real quickly. So there is a subsection in the Public Records Act under statute that allows any agency to go to a district court and apply to the district court and request that anything that is of a sensitive nature that would not be in the public interest for that information to be released, we can request that we can withhold it under that process. But it's different than all the other exceptions under the Public Records Act. Under all the other exceptions, the agency can just make the determination, and then it's up to the requester to take an agency to court over the difference. With caller data, we have to be the proactive party that goes to court to apply to protect that information.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion.
I would so move. I second.
So Commissioner Crank made the motion, Commissioner Rael seconded to approve this as presented. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Mr. Edberg.
Good morning, everybody. Next agenda item will be Chapter 30, Regulation Governing Fur Dealers. This regulation review is part of the governor's initiative on reg reduction, which we've been working on the last couple years. For those commissioners that have been around, remember a couple years ago we did a whole pile of these. So the changes are pretty minor. I'll go through this fairly quick and move on to the next one. So as Mark said, this public meeting was held in conjunction with Chapter 1. As he stated, there was nobody in attendance. We did receive one comment, which is attached in your notebook. If you turn to 30-1, Section 2 and 3 are deleted. Those are no longer needed. Section 2, just some minor verbiage changes. Section 3, just some correction in terminology, what's used in statute and what's used in other regs. Renumbering, and then on 30-2, Section 7, the new Section 5, several things again have been deleted, and then other modifications for correct verbiage and meeting statute and other regulatory requirements. So with that, that's a brief overview of Chapter 30, the changes. Any questions?
Scott, can you give me a rough idea how many licensed fur dealers we have in the state?
Fur dealers, we have, let's see, I wrote that down. We have 11 non-resident and 13 resident for a total of 24 currently as of today.
So we have non-resident fur dealers.
Yes. And one of the biggest fur dealers in the state, Pesca out of Nebraska, comes here regularly. And this is a time where you'll see they'll start advertising in the local papers, Quick Saver, Penny Saver, whatever you call them, and they're making their rounds right now, buying furs into early, late winter, especially bobcats.
Okay.
But yep, and it's fee difference. They have to apply, have a license. They have to keep records.
Thank you. Other questions for Scott? What's the pleasure of the commission?
I would so move. I so second.
Commissioner Crank and Commissioner Rael. The motion was to approve the regulation as presented. Any other discussion? Is there any member of I should have been doing this before, but is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this issue? If not, we'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That was easy, Scott. That was painless, wasn't it?
That was. Next regulation, Chapter 59, regulation governing tanneries. Just a note, we do not, the commission or the department does not license tanneries. However, we do regulate tanneries with regards to mainly record keeping and what has to be tagged or not tagged. So just a clarification, so we have no records how many tanneries we have in the state through department licensing. Again, we had one meeting, 0 attendance, 1 comment, which is in your notebook. Again, a lot of this is part of the governor's initiative on regulation reduction. We go to the reg 59-1. Again, we deleted section 2, not needed. The old section 3, the new section 2A and B, those terms are defined in another regulation, so they're not needed here. And then a lot of the rest of the regulation is just clarification of verbiage, terminology, and what's used in other regulations. You go down to 59-2, old section 5, new section 4. Again, just clarification on records and the tanner, not the tannery. The tanner is the actual person who runs the tannery. A tannery can't keep records. It has to be a person. Top of 59-3, D, delete all the regional offices. That's not needed because it goes to, the records are required to go to the game warden. 5 and 6, the old 6 and 7, the new 5 and 6, again, just clarification on terminology and verbiage so it matches other regs and reads correctly with those changes. So that's a really quick and brief overview, but again, it's mainly reg reduction to the governor's initiative. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Now, we wouldn't have the same situation with resident and non-resident applicants here. This is only the resident tanneries, am I correct? Are the tanneries located within Wyoming?
That's correct. The statute only allows us to regulate what's done in Wyoming. And so if someone shipped something out of state, they'd have to possibly meet our game tag statute, or whatever state was accepting that, they'd have to meet their state statute. So it depends on what they were shipping out. But this would only affect tanneries in state. And as far as I'm aware of, there's only a half dozen at the most.
Yes, Commissioner Rael.
So Scott, this new change basically streamlines the current regulation then, is what I've been told, is in a nutshell?
Commissioner President Culver, Commissioner Rael, in a nutshell, it reduces a lot of redundancy that's in other regs, and reduces the length of the reg, clarifies it more, but in another nutshell, it still kind of has the same requirements that that are still required by statute.
So it presents a short story as opposed to
correct.
a book.
It's a good way to put it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President, Scott, are bobcats the only fur that requires a tag from the department?
So under our Chapter 4, Commissioner, President Culver, Commissioner Schmid, under Chapter 4, our trapping regulation, yes, bobcats do require a CITES tag on a raw fur before they can be taken to a tannery or sold.
Okay.
So they're, yes.
And that's the only fur that requires that?
At this time, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So mountain lion does not fall under the CITES Act?
Commissioner, President Culver, so for fur bearers, a bobcat, since it's a spotted cat, requires a CITES tag, and that's through the international
But
CITES
lions are a trophy
law.
game animal.
Or mountain lion, depending on what you were doing with it, who was doing it, may require a game tag, but that would be on a case-by-case basis. And again, that's what some of this talks about, is when furs have to have either a game tag or some other type of tag, i.e. the CITES bobcat tag.
Okay, thank you.
Again, a lot of the requirements in here have been the same for years. We've just tried to clarify them, shorten them, and make sure the proper terminology is used. As we change other regs, we have to make sure these regs are changed.
Thank you. Other questions? Need a motion?
So moved.
Galen moved,
I'll second.
and Commissioner Rael seconded to adopt the regulation as proposed. Any other discussion? Any comments from members of the public? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, that brings us to, Scott, go ahead. You're going to introduce our next speaker?
President Culver, Commissioners, Director Talbot, my pleasure this morning to introduce Wyoming's Regional Director for Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Ms. Jill Ton. This morning she will present the Commission with two checks, one dealing with Access Yes, and the second one on Wyoming's habitat projects for this year. So with that, Ms. Ton.
Jill, Tony, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. We, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation of Wyoming, are very happy to present a check for Access Yes and also a check for game and fish led projects. This is a portion of the $420,000 that we spent on Wyoming's elk habitat, conservation education, and hunter education. So, Mr. President, it would be our honor if you would come forward and allow us to present these checks to you.
Thank you so much.
We have $76,000 on game and fish led projects and $7,500 for Access Yes.
Rocky Mountain elk in Wyoming raises a ton of money. Puts a lot on the ground. It's great. I noticed that one of those conservation groups won. Such a small state. At the top, right near the top, National Turkey Federation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Yeah, right at the top. It's awesome. It is.
You know, okay, Mr. Talbot.
Mr. President, members of the commission, if I may, for just a moment, I don't have any prepared marks here, but please recall that we have a number of conservation organizations that really, really work hard for the commission and for the department. And I'm going to name a couple of them, not that I intend to miss anybody, but there's some small conservation organizations such as the Sheridan Johnson County Pheasants Forever, Bow Hunters of Wyoming, and others that do a tremendous amount for this commission, for the department, and for wildlife in the state of Wyoming. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, I have bragged on these folks literally nationwide. This crew of folks has been the #1 fundraising state in the United States, I think, for the last 6 or perhaps 7 years in a row. They are the master at raising money. And Jill Ton last year looked at the amount of money that had been raised in other states such as California and Colorado, and bless her soul, the last week she said, I want Wyoming to be the #1 chapter again. So she spent her entire Christmas vacation on the phone raising that last few $1,000s to put Wyoming over the edge again. And that's the kind of dedication that we see from folks in Rocky Mountain Elk and Wyoming. We're the first state that they have spent $1 million in. We're the first state that they have a million acres of habitat and easements. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has been a tremendous partner to the sportsmen of Wyoming, to the wildlife of Wyoming, this department, and this commission. And they certainly deserve a tremendous amount of recognition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Talbot. And just for everybody's information, we ended up taking number one last year by $604.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, so let's take a 10-minute break and we'll meet back here about 5 minutes after the hour.
So did you go to the Rams game? Did you go to the Rams game?
Just got back yesterday about 5.
Doesn't that wear you out?
Oh, hell yes. Especially keeping track of our grandkids. You know, Jenny and I, and we took one of our son-in-law, and then my daughter couldn't make it, so she has 2 youngest ones. So she's not that football fan. But yeah,
So you guys went out
Charlie,
to
my man.
Haystacks?
Well, Jacob came.
I think I do.
You know when I went, right? It was like so much brand. I couldn't get any around anyone.
You were on the
Cleveland
Transportation
Mud.
Commission, right?
I didn't go.
Right.
Yeah, I did go on opening day. It opened on Sunday, so I
Yeah,
went
yeah.
Sunday, and
That's
Jacob
treating me
followed
pretty darn
me.
good. How about you?
We got in there barely.
This is
I
Charles.
wanted
He
to
was
camp.
a commissioner.
Barely.
Charlie,
Muddy,
good to meet you.
snowy, wet. Oh, it's a mess. And we hunted Sunday afternoon, and then Jake ended up leaving because he was worried about getting Jake just rose, left, and then he was going to come back Tuesday, but he couldn't even get in. It was so muddy, really. So I ended up, I couldn't drive, so I had to hunt out of my camp. So I ended up hunting on the haystacks up in the mountains, and then on the my last day, which was I think I hunted the last of the hunt. Well, I forget when it was. So I had one day I could drive, and I did make it over to my spot, and I did see a nice mature buck. I could have killed it, but it was a 3x3, and we have a 4-point.
Yeah.
But I forgot the eye guards count as a point. I forgot about that. So if they're greater than an inch, it counts. I could have killed a big, thick, mature 3x3 with big eye guards.
Was there many people out there? Was it too muddy?
There was quite a few people out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see. So I saw that one mature buck, and that was it.
What, on top, you didn't see anything up there?
Nope. I saw a couple of bulls.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started again. Sean, before you step up here, I do want to recognize one individual I see in the audience, Keith Grant, longtime county commissioner from this area. Keith, welcome to the meeting. Thanks for coming. Right. Okay, Sean.
Good morning again, President Culver, members of the Commission, and Director Talbot. Just have one item under the authorization to proceed today. The Fort Steele Public Access Area. It's 15 miles east of Rollins on the south side of I-80 along the North Platte River. William and Tamara Parsons own an 80-acre parcel approximately half a mile south of the Commission-owned land. Let's see if I can put that back down to one slide here, which would be this area in purple here. The Parsons are requesting that the Commission grant them a permanent access easement along the existing road there. The Parsons have agreed to pay the associated costs in acquiring the proposed easement from the Commission, including the survey, appraisal, and the market value of the easement. The Department recommends the Commission vote to authorize the Department to proceed with negotiations with the Parsons, and be happy to answer any questions you have at this time on that.
So I assume, yeah, go ahead.
What's the current status of the road going to their tract?
So currently there is a 2-track road that runs right along the river here and goes through this piece of property as well and then into the Parsons. And that's the road that they would like a permanent easement from us on.
Mr. President, who owns the property between the Parsons and our access area?
Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, it is the Overland Trail Land and Cattle Company.
So are they working with us and the Parsons, or?
Yes, Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, that is correct. They have already received a permanent easement from Overland Trail through this piece of property.
Other questions for Sean? So, and you did say that there will be an appraisal for this?
Mr. President, yes, that's correct. They will obtain an appraisal, and they've agreed to pay the Commission market value for the easement, as well as pay for the appraisal or any survey work that would.
And what is the department's recommendation?
To grant the department authorization to proceed with negotiations with the Parsons.
Commission?
I would so move.
Second.
Did you get that? Okay. So the motion is to authorize the department to proceed with negotiations on this access agreement. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. President. The other agenda item that we have for you today, we originally planned to bring the Lander Front Conservation Easement that was given authorization to proceed at the July meeting in Afton before you for final approval. And in doing so, we released a newspaper article requesting public comment for that proposed acquisition. However, certain aspects of that acquisition will take longer than originally planned, and therefore the department would like to postpone its recommendation for a final approval to a commission meeting at a later date. We would, however, still request that the commission open the floor to any members of the public who are attending the meeting today that would like to comment on that potential acquisition, and open the floor to them if they came up today.
Does any member of the public have any comment or concern on this issue? Commissioners? I guess we're good.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Sean. Sean, how long is your next agenda item going to take? We could go ahead and get started on that if you want, or is it
President Culver, that is the Habitat and Access presentation for the Cody region, I believe.
I don't want to cut you off in the middle of it. Sherry, can you explain? Lunch is going to be brought in
Yes, sir. They're anytime.
anytime?
Have some platters of sub sandwiches, and they're going to be set up in the back. They're not here yet, so.
Well, maybe we'll go ahead and tackle this agenda item before lunch, if that's okay.
That's fine,
But,
Mr.
but don't feel rushed.
Yeah.
Thanks.
As soon as I get the PowerPoint brought up.
While they're bringing up that PowerPoint, Commissioner Rael, can you can you fill us in on the open house tonight? What's going to happen, where it's at, what time?
By all means, yes, thank you, President Keith. We are going to have a drawing for lifetime youth licenses, the combination license, which consists of the conservation stamp, upland bird, fishing license, and small game. And unbeknown to me, we started this thing thinking that we were going to get 2 or 4. Well, we have 41 that we're going to give away. So we're going to recruit a lot of hunters today. So, and I think it's wonderful that the community has stepped up, and nobody, well, there was 2 that said no, but they'll be on my list next time. So the first one's on my list. But very successful, very giving the community. Once I mentioned youth, that was all open arms. So,
really,
and I mean hugs, not guns. So when it's arms, you got to be careful. In any event, that's a tribute to Lovell, Cali, Byron, and Beaver. So I didn't even talk to anybody from Grable, and I feel bad, but I just didn't have the time. There was a few I talked to in Cody that no problem, same in Powell, but Grable, Faison, Worland, or Thermopolis, I never talked to anybody or conveyed the drawing we were going to have. So anyways, in a nutshell, Keith, I appreciate that.
And that's, one more time, where it's at and what time?
Right here today at 4 o'clock we'll begin, and I think John and Scott, we talked about 4:20 being the first drawing, and then we'll have 3 drawings, and I do believe that we're talking about, it'll be a work in progress, so I think we may change things up, not the requirements, but maybe add a few of the adults to the drawing.
Dave,
okay.
Dave, kudos to you and Jenny for your efforts on getting this all set up and organized. Greatly appreciate it.
The least I can do. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Talbot, it's with pleasure today that I introduce Brad Sorensen. He's our Habitat and Access Supervisor for the Cody region. He's going to give an overview of the WHMAs and public access areas that you guys own and manage within the Cody region. So with that, we'll go ahead and have Brad get going.
Bear with us here while we're getting our technology issues figured out. Welcome to you, Brad. It's good to see you here.
Thanks. Good to see you guys too.
You know, maybe.
Okay, as Ray mentioned, Brad Sorensen, Habitat and Access Supervisor for the Cody and Sheridan regions. And we're going to give you a short presentation on the Commission managed lands and public access areas in the Cody region. Our mission statement is enhance and conserve habitat and serve people. Vision statement is manage Commission lands to be the benchmark for quality wildlife habitat and provide the public with recreational opportunities. Within the Cody region, we have 3 permanent positions, the supervisor and 2 biologists. We have 5 wildlife habitat management areas covering 53,352 acres and 49 public access areas. There's myself, Brad, at the top. We have Craig Swanson. He kind of handles the western side of the Bighorn Basin. We have Eric Shorma on the eastern side of the Bighorn Basin. This slide kind of shows the entire Bighorn Basin. If you can, it's kind of tough to see, but the red marks are our WHMAs, and everything in blue are our public access areas throughout the whole basin. Medicine Lodge WHMA is 12,700 acres. The Renner Wildlife Habitat Management Area is 15,590 acres. Sunlight Wildlife Habitat Management Area is 1,414 acres. Sunshine WHMA is 4,434 acres. And Yellowtail, which is our largest WHMA, is 19,214 acres.
Can you go back to the map?
Sure.
I'm geographically challenged. Can you point out those HMAs on there? What do you got there?
Yeah, so right here in the red, that's our Sunshine WHMA. Up here is our Sunlight Basin. Over here is Yellowtail, which is just east of us here a little ways. And we come down here, there's Medicine Lodge, and then Renner. And to get your bearings straight, this is Hyattville right here and Ten Sleep down here.
Oh, yeah, hold on. Where are we at today?
Today we are right there at level.
I got here in the dark, so I can't remember how the hell I
Trying to figure out how to get home.
All right, this is a map of our Medicine Lodge Wildlife Habitat Management Area. The red is the boundary of the entire unit. Medicine Lodge was established in 1972 to provide winter range for elk. Medicine Lodge is managed under a cooperative agreement. Of the 12,700 acres, 1,863 acres are commission lands, 1,600 acres are leased from the Office of State Lands and Investments, and 9,237 acres are BLM. The main public uses of this area are elk and deer hunting, game bird hunting, and fishing. Our cooperative agreement on this unit is with the BLM and the State Office of Lands and Investments. Some of the things we have planned or have recently took part in up here is we recently rebuilt a boundary fence. We're having a lot of trespass livestock issues, so we redid the boundary fence. We're working on prescribed burns up there with the BLM through spring, fall, on into next spring. It just kind of depended on the conditions. Another thing that we're looking at is a possible campground expansion on the lower end of that. The lower end is operated by the state parks, and they kind of run a little park down there. Another thing that recently took place was a big fish passage / creek rehab. It was roughly a mile of creek that was pretty bad eroded. We went in there with the help of Laura Burkhart, our aquatic habitat biologist, and pretty much fixed the stream. There's a lot of rock veins and barbs, and it's really a neat thing. If any of you have the chance, you could go check it out. These are some pictures of the Medicine Lodge area. This top picture is the recent boundary fence that was built. Just other random pictures of the unit. This is our renter unit. It's two separate pieces. There's a lower end and then an upper end up here. The red again is the actual boundary of the unit. Renter was established in 1979 to provide winter range for big game such as elk and mule deer. This area is also managed under a cooperative agreement. Of the 15,590 acres, 4,696 acres are commission lands, 894 acres are leased from the Office of State Lands and Investments, and 10,000 acres are BLM. Some of the main public uses are hunting, deer and game birds, fishing and trapping, as well as elk hunting.
Excuse me, Brad. Could you go back to the map real quick, please? On the right-hand side, I see inside of the larger boundary.
Right here?
Yeah, what is that?
That's actually a chunk of private land that is right in the middle of our unit.
Thank you.
Could you also address on these, Brad? Are they being used for agricultural purposes?
Yes, some. Well, most of ours, almost all of our areas, we do have some sort of farming, irrigation type practices, I guess you could say, as well as cattle grazing. This area right here, we do have this Renner Reservoir right here, which we are currently working on dredging, deepening the reservoir a little bit, and we're going to put a new control structure in there. It's fed by an artesian well, so we can fill it right back up and stock fish for the public. Another thing down, right kind of down in here, we have a series of meadows that are hayed, and in the bottom right here, there's a series of wetlands as well. And we're currently working with DU on coming up with a wetlands plan for those wetlands. They're not the greatest soil conditions down there, so we're working with DU to see what we can do to make them a more effective wetland system.
Good. I just wanted to kind of emphasize that point. I think it's important that our folks know that these HMAs are not taken out of agricultural production, and that we do pay property tax on those lands. So, thank you.
A couple more things we have going on at Renner. Like we mentioned, we do have contract farming and grazing. We're also doing a lot right now in this lower end. We have a little study going on with the University of Wyoming on cheatgrass control. This area has got a lot of cheatgrass in it, and we're looking at several different ways. There's obviously the spraying. We're using cattle grazing as well in the spring and the fall to try to knock some of that cheatgrass back. So the deal that's going on down here is a 5-year study with the University of Wyoming, and it's basically there's a control, there's a herbicide, and then there's this new herbicide that's a granular, and it's basically plateau but in a granular formula. And the idea of it is it'll get directly into the soil. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. These are some of the pictures of Renner. This up here is Eric Shorma. I believe he's spraying spotted knapweed. And then just other pictures that you can see what kind of landscapes kind of like up there. This is our Sunlight Wildlife Habitat Management area. Again, you can see the red is the outline of the unit. This is relatively small area. It's only 1,400 acres, but there is a ton of elk that utilize this. Right now we are in the process of converting some of our meadows, almost all of our meadows, to a pivot irrigation system, and in turn we can get some more desirable forage up there for the wintering elk.
So are we using that hay for some of the feed grounds, or?
No, all that hay is left standing for the elk in the winter.
Oh, okay.
So Sunlight was established in 1960 to 1965 to provide winter range for elk. All 1,415 acres of the WHMA are commission-owned lands. One of the main public uses up there is hunting, and it's also access to adjoining forest lands. I mentioned we're working on that. The pivots, we should have roughly 200 acres directly under center pivot this coming spring. Before, the irrigation system just was not very efficient, and this way we can actually put the water directly where we need it, and hopefully those elk will benefit from it. These are some of the pictures up there. It's kind of tough to see, but right here is one of the new pivots that has been installed. Just another picture. And this is a boundary fence that we recently rebuilt last year. We were having a lot of issues with trespass livestock off the forest, so we went in there and we put just a hair over 6 miles of new fence in. This is our Sunshine Wildlife Habitat Management Area. This is outside of Matitsi. Again, the red is the boundary. And for some of you that could be familiar, this is the Upper Sunshine Reservoir right here. Sunshine WHMA was established in 1992 to provide winter range for elk. All of the 4,434 acres are commission-owned lands. Public use on this WHMA is open to foot or horseback travel only. Recently, we do have, again, grazing on this WHMA, and because of the lease payments on that, we have been able to rebuild the entire boundary fence around this WHMA. So we're keeping all the trespass livestock off again, which is good. This is a couple pictures up there. You can see the reservoir in the background, and then this is just some of our fences up there.
Mr. President?
Yes, Pat.
Why is access limited to foot or horseback only? What's the difference?
You know, I really couldn't tell you that. It's been established, I think, since we first acquired the property, and I really don't know why we've limited to that. It's turned out well. There's not many roads in that particular WHMA, and I think that might be the reason for it.
Okay.
Okay, this is our yellowtail wildlife habitat management area. We are just sitting kind of like right over here right now, so relatively close to where we're at right now. This WHMA is almost 19,500 acres. The pink is the reservoir when it's full. Some of the pink is, some of it's Park Service lands. But you can see yellowtail is quite large. We have the Shoshone River coming in here, as well as the Bighorn River coming in here. So it's a pretty substantial area. So yellowtail WHMA was established in the early 1960s to enhance waterfowl and migratory bird habitat. This area is also managed under a cooperative agreement. Of the 19,214 acres, 1,209 acres are commission-owned lands, 18,005 acres are under federal ownership. Main public uses are pheasant, deer, turkey hunting, fishing, and camping. The cooperative agreement that I mentioned is with the Bureau of Reclamation, the Bureau of Land Management, and the National Park Service. And I want to point out we do have the Chief of Resources for the National Park Service, Virginia DuBois, here. So if anybody would like to speak with her once this is done, I'm sure she'd be interested in answering questions as far as management and everything else that takes place at this area. Whoops, sorry. We have several things going on at Yellowtail right now. Again, there is 2 different contract farming operations that take place here on the northern half of the Shoshone River and on the southern half. Of that, we irrigate and farm roughly 1,200 acres. Some of these acres are in permanent cover. Some of them will be in food plots, alfalfa. You know, it just kind of varies. We do some cereal grain crops out there as well. On the southern end down here, we are using goat grazing as a study to see if we can eradicate or, I guess, knock back Russian knapweed. We put the goats in there and we graze it heavy. They move on, then they come back and they graze it again. We also have a series of pens set up down there, and it's a study with the University of Wyoming again, basically to see if the goats are doing any good. We also have, we're also working on our wetlands, which there's a series of wetlands all over this place, with DU to come up with a good plan of attack, I guess, for the future. These are some of the pictures of the area. Whitetail buck that was harvested out there. This gated pipe is on one of our fields. That gated pipe was donated by the Wyoming Outdoorsmen. They're a local outdoor group, and they have really taken to Yellowtail. And since, in the 3 years I've been here, they have spent approximately $21,000 on irrigation upgrades on the Yellowtail unit.
Where are they located out of, Wyoming Outdoorsmen?
Mr. President, members of the commission, they're in Cody, but they are trying to expand and kind of broaden. They're looking at getting a chapter over in Sheridan as well as other parts of the state.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to our public access areas. As I mentioned, we have 49 public access areas in the Cody region. The Bighorn River public access areas, there's 10 different access areas along there. We have the Carter Billy Miles public access area, 8 access areas along the Clarks Fork River. We have a Hyattville Logging Road public access area, Jim Mountain Road public access area, Newton Lakes public access area. North Fork of the Shoshone, there are 5 access areas. The Shoshone River, there are 12 access areas. South Fork, 4 access areas. Upper and Lower Sunshines, there are 2 access areas. And the Wigwam Rearing Station, which has 4 access areas. So on the Bighorn River, we have 10 parking areas along the Bighorn River near Thermopolis. Wetting of the Waters is our farthest south public access area, and it's 13 acres of commission-owned land. It is probably the most used public access area we have in the Cody region. The areas along the Bighorn River provide 10.3 miles of river access for fishing and hunting. Most of them are within 100 feet of the high water mark. Our Carter Billy Miles area is outside of Ten Sleep. This area is open from September 1st to December 31st. This area provides sportsmen with access to 4,806 acres of private land and thousands of acres of BLM and national forest land. We have 9 parking areas along the Clarks Fork River. These areas provide over 12 miles of access to the Clarks Fork River for fishing and waterfowl hunting within 50 feet above the high water mark. There's also 1 primitive boat ramp at the Beartooth parking area. Our Hyattville Logging Road public access area, it is down in between Hyattville and Tensleep. This basically is an easement through private land that allows the public to access thousands of acres of BLM and U.S. Forest Service land. The Jim Mountain Road is similar to the Hyattville Logging Road. It's another easement through private land, and it goes to the Jim Mountain Trailhead, which allows the public to access thousands of acres, again, of Forest Service land. Our Newton Lakes public access area is directly outside of Cody. There are two parking areas there. There's East Newton and West Newton. This area is managed through a cooperative agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation. It provides access to approximately 80 surface acres of water and is a trophy trout fishery. The North Fork River public access areas, there are 5 of those along the North Fork of the Shoshone River. These areas are also managed through cooperative agreements. Some of these are BLM, some of them are Office of State Lands and Investments. It provides access to 1.6 miles of the North Fork of the Shoshone River, and there are 2 boat ramps. Shoshone River PAAs, there are 12 of those, and 4 boat ramps along the Shoshone River. Basically, they start in Cody and run 8 miles east of Powell, so it's a pretty substantial stretch of water. These areas are also managed through cooperative agreements. These areas provide 5.4 miles of river access for fishing and waterfowl hunting. The South Fork of the Shoshone River, we have 3 parking areas along the South Fork. These areas are also managed through cooperative agreements. These areas provide access to over 2 miles of the South Fork Shoshone River for fishing, hunting, and access to thousands of acres of U.S. Forest Service land. Our Sunshine Reservoirs, again, they are located outside of Meeteetse. There's 2 reservoirs, an upper reservoir and a lower reservoir. Each area has a boat ramp, a dock, and a comfort station. These areas provide public access to 2,250 surface acres of year-round trophy trout fishing. These areas are also managed through cooperative agreements. Wigwam public access areas, they're along Tensleep Creek near the Wigwam Rearing Station. These areas provide approximately 2 miles of access to Tensleep Creek. Idaho Pond, it is just a hair outside of Cody. It is on Office of State Land and Investment land. It's a small pond, but it is fantastic fishing. And it's, again, through a cooperative agreement. We have not yet developed this area. We're in the process of it. So soon we'll have it done. These are just some random pictures. This is our, looks like the Corbett boat ramp outside of Cody. This is Wedding of the Waters. And I believe this is up the South Fork. Looks like on our Cody Canal public access area. Again, more pictures of access areas. This is a fishing pier at Newton Lakes. This is one of the access area signs up at the Clarks Fork. And this is the Lower Sunshine boat ramp and boat dock. I guess that's it. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll try to answer some questions if anybody has any.
Any questions?
I got a question.
Yes, Mark.
How is the National Park Service involved? I don't, like I said, my geography isn't that good. How are they involved with the, is there?
Mr. President, Commissioner Anselmi, so the Yellowtail Wildlife Habitat Management Area is, there's a mixture of all different landowners out there. So the National Park Service owns a majority of the land out there. And through cooperative agreements, the Game and Fish manages that area in cooperation with the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Bureau of Reclamation. So basically, I mean, they own the land, but we kind of manage it. it's tough to say, but we work hand in hand with them as far as road maintenance. We'll do habitat treatments with them. There's various different things that we work with the Park Service on. They're really good at assisting us if we need their help, you know, with like the goat study for one, road maintenance. There's a number of different things that they do. Weed spraying is another big one. They have quite a bit of equipment on site, so if we need some equipment, we're able to use their equipment as well.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Pat.
tell me a little bit more. Was it the Wyoming Outdoorsman?
Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, so the Wyoming Outdoorsman is a group based out of Cody, and their sole purpose is basically to gather funds and then put those funds directly back into Wyoming.
They've had a significant impact in this area, at least for sure, haven't they?
They have, yes.
And weren't they were kind of previously with Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife Group and weren't happy with that group and formed their own entity, as I understand it. Is that accurate?
That is correct. You know, they actually approached me and said, you know, we'd like you to come to our meeting and talk to us about some of your projects. And so I've been going to their meetings for about 3 years now. And, you know, I'll just tell them some of the things I'm working on or thinking about. And then they pick and choose what they would like to fund. Yellowtail's been a big one with the irrigation upgrades. They've bought gated pipe. They've bought underground pipe. They've bought head gates. They also jumped on and were instrumental in getting the parking lot at Wedding of the Waters enlarged. That was one of their big deals that they wanted. So they have these banquets and they raise quite a bit of money, and then they find places that they would like to spend it, basically. And they're an excellent group.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I got to tell you, before I got on the commission, I'll be honest, I had no idea of the significance of the impact that the department and previous commissions over the years had had as far as habitat management and public access issues. I'm in awe of what they've done, and the presentation you just gave on the Cody region really exemplifies that. Thank you, folks, for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. President, man?
Yes.
Sorry I had to step out, Brad, but I wanted to ask you, what's the oldest HMA? Which would it be, I think? Ray? Yes. Sunlight?
Yeah, I believe so. So, Mr. President, Commissioner Rail, I believe it's Sunlight WHMA. That one was from the 60s. I believe Sunshine was in the 70s. Medicine Lodge and Renner, I believe, were in the 70s as well. And
so it would have been Yellowtail too, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
The reason I bring that up is because Yellowtail's been around since I was a kid, and there's more recreation out there on that habitat than meets the eye. It's a awesome, wonderful thing that you guys do to maintain that for the public. 19,000 acres to hunt and fish if you choose to. Not good fishing, but but there's so many things you can do there. It's really a great thing that you guys do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it. So before we break for lunch, I'm going to issue a call to the public. Is there any member out there, any member of the public that would like to address the commission? Keith. Keith, would you like to go ahead and approach the podium so that we can get you on the microphone, and then those folks that are viewing online can also hear what you have to say?
In the past, why the lake was pretty much managed for the river below the dam, and in 2006, why Pat was involved in it, and we got to working with the federal government and the National Park Service and the Game and Fish, and we've now got a balance in our water management so that we have a good fishing opportunity in the lake on the Wyoming end now also. And I'd just like to thank the Game and Fish and the Park Service and everything for the work we've done and for the opportunity we have to have this water recreation in Wyoming. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
President Culver, Director Talbert, and the Commission. Kurt Eisnock from the Wild Sheep Foundation here in Wyoming. As the presentation of Yellowtail Habitat Management Area was being given, the issue of grazing domestic goats on the habitat area was brought up. I would just hope that the Commission, that Director Talbert and the Game and Fish would work closely between the habitat there and the biologist Leslie Schreiber with the world-class sheep resource that is just directly across the reservoir. Those sheep tend to wander. We would be very, very not doing the job that we need to do and you need to do to take care of that sheep resource if those two came together and we had a disease issue. So just a heads up, coordination within the department and an assurance that goat grazing on the habitat management area does not impact that world-class sheep resource on the other side of the reservoir. Thank you for your time and thank you for your
Kurt.
work.
Well, your point is well taken. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and recess for lunch. Let's see. Why don't we meet back here at 1:15. And